So in the next few minutes, we're going to be looking at, some very key issues. There's no doubt that Nigeria is going through, economic upheavals, crises here and there. And it's sad to know when you hear that even at this time, we are, we have challenges as relates to health in the country. I mean, recently, we've seen outbreaks now, I should say, of a couple of infections. We've seen the diphtheria, that is ravaging some states of the country. Then, of course, the dengue fever is also there against the backdrop that Nigeria is still grappling with the suspicion of Ebola virus and all that. So in the next few minutes, we're going to be looking at how best we can actually manage, infectious diseases during economic crisis. Now, we're so privileged this morning to have Dr. Leonard Atsikidi. He's a consultant and, of course, a family health physician, and who just retired, enjoying perhaps his retirement now. He just retired from the University of Benin Teaching Hospital. Doctor, you're welcome to the program this morning on ITV.
It's a pleasure, Evans.
Yeah.
Thank you, Biasatu.
And also my colleague, Lina, is Hello. Also there with me. Yeah, hi. How? All right, so, Doki, we are looking at infectious diseases in the country. And I mean, for the sake of emphasis, we hear dengue fever, diphtheria. From the professional perspective, what are these infectious diseases that we're talking about right now?
Again, thank you, viewers at home. Well, the two diseases you just mentioned, dengue fever and diphtheria. The dengue fever is a disease that is spread by mosquito, whereas the diphtheria is caused by bacteria that is called current bacteria diphtheriae. So one is a viral disease, that is the dengue, spread by mosquito, whereas the other is a bacterial disease. And in all these infections, they are not absolutely new, but since the advent of the EPI, Expanded Program of Immunization, the prevalence of diphtheria has actually been down. And the reason why I think it's resurfacing at this time is that after you have been immunized for diphtheria, ideally you are supposed to have a booster dose, at intervals. Usually the first doses they are given at childhood, and between 11 to 12 years, you are supposed to have a booster. Then subsequently every 10 years. But in this part of the world, emphasis has been on just the EPI. And it is documented that as you grow older, that the immunity that you acquire from that first immunization wanes. And if it is waning, that means you need to boost your immunity again against diphtheria. But this has not been the practice in this part of the world. And we also know that, like in countries where immunization is strictly adhered to, those countries we call advanced countries, they hardly have issues of diphtheria. Then for the dengue fever, like I said, dengue fever is a viral disease, but it's spread by the mosquito. All of us should be familiar by now with where mosquitoes like to breed. They like to breed in stagnant water, dirty places, bushy places. And the culture of many of our people is unhygienic. For example, if you go along the street of Benin, you find stagnant water here and there. And even you go to some compounds, even within their compounds are bushy. And especially if the owner of the house does not reside there, everybody says it's not my duty to do that. And the place becomes bushy, and it creates a habitat for rodents, mosquitoes, and what have you. And these are places that you know, some of these carriers of some of these diseases, they like to breed. Even Lassa fever, for example, is carried by rodents, the multimamate rat. Despite that our people know of all this, many don't take precautions against these diseases. And so why we're having this outbreak is, to me, I think, like I said earlier on, in this part of the world, nobody emphasizes the booster dose for the diphtheria vaccine, which ought to be every 10 years. And our environment still remains very untidy, very, unhealthy. And the attitude of our people, a few days ago, I was talking to a set of persons, and I tried to emphasize, I asked a question, I asked them, I said, before you came to work today, how many of you got to work and washed their hands? And nobody. And I asked them, when you leave here and you go to your house, do you wash your hand before you start doing anything? You discover that they don't. Many of us are guilty of all this. Even if you go outside, for example, you are going to meet with a lot of persons and you'll be shaking hands with them. And some of these people have come in contact with, either they may even be carriers, or they've come in contact with some of these diseases we are talking about. And you just, shake the person's hand, you grasp the disease, and you take it to your home and spread to yourself, to your household. So even the common hand washing does a lot of job. You know what we do here, when during the advent of Ebola, you go to most hospitals, you find wash-hand bases before you enter, you find buckets of water before you enter offices. But now, where is it? They've all disappeared. And so, normally nature takes advantage of situations like that, to begin to perpetrate some of these havoc on the people because of our carelessness. So, dengue fever is here, diphtheria is here.
Okay, Mercy.
All right, we're talking about how to manage infectious disease during economic crisis. The question is, what are the first things that tend to collapse in health during an economical crisis? Is it hospital capacity? Is it vaccination or surveillances?
Well, if you talk about things that tend to collapse, virtually, if there's economic crisis, like we are facing, there are hospitals in Nigeria, even teaching hospitals in Nigeria, that can't afford to pay the Band A bill for electricity.
What do you mean by, the Band A bill now?
Yes. Yeah. There are different bills now. There's the Band A, is it B and C? I don't know the others. But the Band A assures you that you get light almost 24/7.
Yes.
But then, it's expensive. Imagine like institutions like University of Benin can't afford to pay. And
you cannot say that.
Sorry. Well, it was on air.
But let us leave that now. I mean,
so I'm sorry about that. Yeah. What I mean, institutions, government institutions, even private institutions can't afford to pay, and so light goes off for a long time, and you're supposed to pump water. This water people need it to wash hands. And at the end of the day, you discover that, some of these diseases begin to rear up their ugly head.
Wow.
So, and if the way the economy is, both capacity, consumables, anything you can think of in a health facility, they all deteriorate because they need finances to be able to run some of these things. You discover, if you look at the WHO standard for doctor-patient ratio, here in Nigeria, a doctor sees it's like a ratio of 1 to 5,000, whereas the WHO is much less than that.
Yeah.
Less than even, I can't remember the exact figure, but it's much less than that. So a doctor comes to work, he sees up to 40, 50 patients in a day. And so you discover that both capacity, the entire institution, everything that is required to run the institution, they all collapse. So in an economic depression, well, in quote, like we are experiencing in our country, worse in some states where you have insurgency and what have you.
Outbreaks.
Yes. So you discover that some of these diseases, they are bound to, crop up. We pray that our IDPs don't get some of these deadly infections.
Okay. All right. So just as the country is still, grappling with, like what we said a while ago, Ebola virus, and of course, recently we heard of the yellow fever, the Lassa fever is still there. It's been coming off and on. Here in Edo State, we had our own fair share. Now, what are the alternative ways? Because like what you said, that Nigeria no doubt going through economic issues and all that. Now, are there alternative ways maybe that we can employ as a nation at this time so that we can actually battle these infections?
They say prevention is better than cure.
Okay.
Well, some people may not know, but I assume that everybody knows that the API is free. And
what do you mean by for the sake of emphasis, what do you mean by the API now?
Expanded program on
immunization.
Those immunization they give to
children. Yeah.
But you will still hear some people say that they don't allow their children to have immunization as a result of one fable or the other. Now,
Doc, what we are looking at now, there are allegations now that even the EPI is not current the way it ought to be. In other words, it's not regular the way it ought to be, because it may be free. Now, these are World Health, program, aids and all that they give to the world. But you discover that government still has a role, maybe in terms of enabling environment to create, facilities to run it, transportation and all that. Now, you still find that there are allegations that this program is not regular the way it ought to be. So if that is the case, what should we do as a nation?
You see, when it comes to donations, in terms of international donations, of vaccines, drugs and what have you, every nation has what looks like a counterpart funding. For example, if they donate vaccines to Nigeria, it is required that Nigeria should be responsible for the reception, distribution, storage, and what have you. Yeah. But you discover that sometimes when those things are coming, we don't prepare for those other things we want to do as a nation. Because I learned during my residency days, I was aware of a situation that happened that something was donated to our nation and we didn't provide what was required of us, and those things got expired.
Oh, wow.
And now the problem we also have with this immunization, there's a lot of corruption along that line. For example, when when they want to do this, their occasional vaccination that they go about, local government are in charge. They now ask councillors to bring, those who are going to participate. Now they select people. Like somebody complained to me, even the stipend that is supposed to be given to those boys and girls who will be walking around the place, the councillors will still collect from them. I'm saying what I know. They will still collect from that small stipend that will be given to those boys. And some of those boys, you know what they do, or girls? They will sometimes go and stay under the tree and tick what they never did.
At the expense
of the populace.
So, sir, what you're trying to say now is we are the cause of our own problem.
We are, definitely. We are. And as long as we have this insatiable appetite, for example, a councillor earns salary.
Yeah.
But the little boy who has nothing that you just use as an ad hoc staff, you will still want to tap from them. So, and in the course of doing that, if you, for example, I am to build this house, the cost of the building is 100 million, and you take 5 million from me, you are telling me that I should just use substandard.
That will impact on the quality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is what is happening about even the immunization we are talking about. And in some places, well, thanks to, I think, WHO also, that provided solar for many of the health centers where you have storage, we now have storage facilities that are powered by those solars. But before then, and of course, it's not even still widespread. So before then, what was happening? Some of these items get expired because of lack of proper storage. And at the end of the day, some of them are still administered to our children, and with the assumption that they've been immunized, whereas they got what they just got was nothing.
Okay. Now, when we talk about the economy now, I know that much attention is drawn on government because government manages the economy and all that. Now, now that we are saying that the economy of the nation is not too impressive, now, are we going to start maybe, because a while ago I asked of the alternatives now. Now, the traditional alternative medicine is still there. Some people say it's cheaper, it's more affordable. You know, well, as a professional, you may not want to suggest that, but what is your take on that?
You see, I used to tell people that in my medical school days, I was taught and trained, and I can only practice what I've been taught and trained for. During my residency, I built on what I was taught at the MBBS level. Now, when you talk about traditional medicine, I have no knowledge. I have no idea about traditional medicine. But what I would say is this: there are still simple things that we need to do in our environment.
Okay.
That will, of course, prevent us from contracting some of these diseases. For example, clear your compound, make your compound clean. Wash your hands regularly. There's no number of times that you should wash your hand in a day. Wash your hands as many times as you can. Ensure that there are no stagnant water around you.
So in other words, most of these diseases we are talking about now, we put them into our mouth, with our mouth ourselves. Wow.
For example, diphtheria is a droplet infection. That means somebody sneezes or coughs, and you come in contact with those things, or maybe it's a droplet infection. So if you, or maybe the items used by that person, you come in contact with it, and you don't even wash your hand. You go outside there, buy orange, you start sucking. At the end of the day, you take in those diseases. So there are simple things you can do to prevent yourself and your household from contracting many of these diseases, including the ones we knew before. So even the Lassa fever we talk about, there are simple measures. For example, you don't make sure your gari in your house, you put them in a container that has a cover, and don't go and dry your gari, under the sun. Gari can be dried on fire. That's what I used to know in my locality. So, and if some people expose the gari inside their house at night, all in the name of drying the gari, especially in this rainy season, and at the end of the day, those rodents will come there, they feed on it, poo on it, and wee on it, and then you take it to the market. And we are used to soaking gari without even, you cannot boil gari you want to soak. So you put inside water and you start drinking.
Okay, in all that I've gathered so far, what you said, what you're trying to say is prevention is better than cure. We as humans, we need to prevent ourselves from all those things to avoid them happening. Of course, health is wealth, right? You need to always, take care of yourself, always do those things. In order that, okay, what you said something earlier about we as humans, not everything, of course, not everything we should blame the government about. We as humans on our own, we cause most of those things by ourselves. What I would just say with everything you've said, what I've gathered so far is the fact that we need to stay clean at all time. Like you said, always wash your hands, always do those little things you feel will prevent you from having all those diseases.
Yeah. So you have a role, you have a role to play in life. In life generally, you see, whatever you become or whatever you acquire or achieve, I tell people 99.9% depends on you. Even as a child, your parents will send you to school, for example. They won't go and stay in the class with you.
Exactly.
So it's not left for you. But some, they will send them to school. As soon as their parents turn back, they become another thing. They are in the street, you know. So in life, you have the greatest role to play. Even when we talk about government, even in the choice of the leadership, it's in our hands. We decide who leads us. So, and if you allow yourself to be influenced by the 20 naira or 2 or 3 or 5,000 they give to you on election day, so be it. So you have chosen your leader. So what I'm saying in essence, in all these, we have a greater role to play, even more than the government we are talking about. We have a greater role to play. Because even if government puts immunization centers at the front of every house, some people will even beat them and drive them away, live in front of my house. If you don't go there, government will not come and force you to take the immunization. I'm aware that there's a center right now near ESH where they are giving booster doses of diphtheria vaccine. So how many people will avail themselves of that?
Okay, as it stands now, Doc, Nigeria has a huge problem, a problem that has to do with the brain drain syndrome in the medical profession. If you go to embassies, of nations of the world in Lagos or in Abuja, you see how young doctors, able-bodied young doctors and women, leaving the country in search of a greener pasture. And here we are, almost every time having infectious diseases coming into the country. So in all this now, what do you think can we do, to manage the situation as it stands now?
You see, when you talk about brain drain, let me tell you, not even just the young. There was a time I went for one this thing. When I got there, I was
also applied?
shocked.
You applied?
Yes, I did. I was shocked when I saw human beings, doctors, battling. And then I was not looking. I said, what is really the problem? Look at the people that are interviewing us. And what makes them better than me, that they will come and be interviewing me? So I made up my mind that from that day I would never go. And I didn't go again. So you see, if we want to keep our workforce, there are basic things that we must do. For example, now I find it difficult to even travel to my village because of security.
Wow.
And so you employ somebody to work in one of those remote areas. He's traveling on the way and is caught on the road. He will not go back again, he will rather go out. So we need to make conscious effort, like government is doing, but we need to see improve to ensure that our roads are secured. For example, I had a very close friend of mine who was on his way to one university, I don't want to mention name. And while on his way, he was going there to go and salvage a life. As he was going, he was shot.
Wow.
The bullet hit him close to the femoral region. Yes. Yeah. And he was bleeding. Before he got to UBTH, he was still alive, in fact, because UBTH mobilized a team with an ambulance, with blood, to go and rescue him. Eventually, they succeeded, brought him to UBTH. That young man had several pints of blood. But eventually, he died.
Wow.
So, how many people will want to stay in that kind of place? So, apart from the monetary aspect of it, the security is an issue.
Exactly.
It's a major, in fact, it's even more than the issue of monetary gains or whatever. Look at what has been happening in the South, where doctors are kidnapped on daily basis. There was a professor that was kidnapped over a year ago. I don't even know whether they still found her. A lady. So, and it's happening all over the place. These terrorists, they kidnap doctors, they keep them in their camp for a very long time. And now using them as tools to manage
their camps.
Yes. So these are major issues that why health professionals, they want to, of course, move out of this country, especially the very young ones.
Okay. All right. So the program is still this morning on ITV. We are looking at how best we can manage infectious diseases, even this period of economic crisis in the situation. We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll just wrap it up so that we can hand over to Abuja.